Hi friends. I've noticed there's this confusion about async await and how it works under the hood, and I'm going to write sample code that hopefully can help you better understand its behavior. What we'll do here is start with a simple example and then work our way to adding exception handling. In our sample code, we have a class called async await, which is two methods run and method async. The method async runs an awaitable task and our program calls the run method. So let's jump right into example 1. The example 1, which is currently on the screen, calls method async, does not wait for it to return, sleeps for 5 seconds, and then writes to the console that it is completed. The method async runs an awaitable task which throws an exception after sleeping for 2 seconds. So what happens when we run this code? So what we saw that the exception as expected was thrown from method async. Since we did not wait for that method async to complete, the run method slept for 5 seconds and then wrote to the console that it has completed execution. Now our application did finish, but we never realized that our awaitable task failed. Now this is not a good thing. So our next step is to add wait on the call to method async. So let's go ahead, do that, and see what happens next. Actually, let's do one more thing. We will take out this thread.sleep since we are going to wait for method async to complete. And so let's go ahead now and run. Aha! So now an exception was thrown, and the exception was not caught by our run method. And more importantly, our application crashed because you no longer see this statement executed in the output. Now this is not a good thing. Now before we go into adding try catch, we are going to change our wait call to a result call. So let's go ahead and change that. Now let's go ahead and run this sample again. The same result. Again, our application crashed, so this is not a good thing. Now let's change the result to using getAwaiter.getResult. Oh, interesting. So the results are similar, except what you would have noticed is that when we use result or wait, the exception thrown was system.aggregateException. Now the exception thrown is system.exception. Now we'll tackle these differences in a future video, but for now we are going to use getAwaiter.getResult for all our future tests. So now the next step is to add exception handling. I have some of this code already written, so I'm going to copy and paste this exception handling code into our existing sample. So let's start by adding exception handling in the run method. And let's see what happens next. So let's go ahead and run this program. So what are the differences we see from the last time we ran this application? So big difference now we see, which is a great thing, is that our application is no longer crashing because our console.write line statement here is getting executed. The next is that we caught the exception in method run, and the method, the exception was of type system.exception. Now let's go ahead and add exception handling to method async. Again, as I said before, I have this code written out, so I'm going to copy and paste it into method async. So what we did here was add exception handling to method async. So we are adding a try catch block where there is a catch block here, and this is writing to console the fact that it caught the exception in method async and the exception type. Now let's go ahead and run this application. So what do we see here? The difference we see from last time is that the exception was caught in method async, and that the catch block in the run method, this here, was not executed. However, our application is running okay, and it executes to its completion as evidenced by this output. Now let's go ahead and throw the exception from method async. So let's add throw and let's rerun. Now what we see is that the exception was first caught in method async, and then it was thrown from there and caught again in the catch block in method run. And the application still completed successfully as evidenced by this line. So this is what we wanted to talk about here. Now there's another thing that I'd like to go over, which is worth understanding, though we'll cover this in a later video. So let's run this again and look at something in the output. What we see here is that the exception caught in method run here is of type system.exception. What happens if I change my method call from getAwaiter.getResult to result? And let's rerun this application. So you see something interesting happen here. Even though method async threw an exception or rethrew an exception of type system.exception, the catch block in the run method caught an exception of system.aggregateException. So this is something to think about. We'll talk about this more in a later video. Thank you for watching.